not really a cinematographer that does well with fake lighting from other directions. I feel it always looks sort of terrible. So I like to try to make the lamps do the homework. My name is Claudio Miranda. I'm a cinematographer, and today we're going to talk about candlelit scenes.
The Oscar goes to Claudio Miranda, Life of Pi.
This is the first Academy Award and second nomination for Claudio Miranda.
There's exciting scenes for me that I love, like the candles and the things that we did. It was nuts. Everyone, thank you so much.
I mean, I've gone crazy on candles. I mean, on Life of Pi, we had 120,000 candles, and we had 2,000 people lighting the candles, so that was pretty extreme.
The gods were my superheroes growing up. Hanuman, the monkey god, lifting an entire mountain to save his friend Lakshman.
You know, I had brought some lights just in case we didn't have enough candles, and we were lighting some backgrounds, and in the end, I just kept on switching them all off, and then we ended up purely on candles in the night's evening. I was lighting even the actors with the candles. If there was a movie light on, I was pretty upset that it was on. If there's a little bit of wind, it gives you this little pulse and flicker. So if you just have a candle that's like static, and the candle's doing this, it looks totally fake. But if you have a candle that's reacting, you know, it's pulsating, it's reacting, it feels real and connected. Because I usually love that. I mean, you're going for a mood, right? So you gotta love what the candle's doing. And we all get proud of it. Like, and most directors I work with are like, fucking candles doing work. I mean, you light the backgrounds like you would normally do, you know? I mean, you do that. You know, put a fill card if you want, you know? I mean, but I like letting things go dark. I mean, I'm not afraid of that at all. Most people I work with are not afraid of that.
Every day you have to go down there and see what was lost. But we've done our job, Jack.
I mean, the first thing to consider when shooting candlelight scenes is that you're going to need a camera that has a pretty high ISO. There's this one candle in Oblivion that's right in the middle. There was no place to put a fake source to add anything more. You know, it's like you're in a glass house.
I don't think they're trying to kill me today. Scavs.
I remember really being worried about it because normally I'm able to use triple wicks, which is you have a wick that's, you know, with 3 wicks kind of built into one candle. It gives you a bigger flame and it gives you a little more light. But the production site I remember had this candle, and it was a very modern candle in this glass and had this really tiny wick. And I was going like, man. And then he says, like, yeah, that's not so bad. And the table, like, it's gonna be really long and they're sitting really far away from them. And I'm in this glass structure, so we can't even put a fake light to, you know, make the candle. So the candle has to really do the homework for the scene. I mean, yes, we could paint it out digitally in reflections, but I didn't want to go down there. I wanted to really make this lamp, and I worked really hard to make this lamp the only source.
Come on.
You know, we had a camera, it was the F65 at the time, which was 800 ASA, and I remember really pushing that candle as much as I can do. You know, I lowered all the projection down, I darkened it as much as I can do, and gave it as much light, and I knew I was going to push it a little bit. I didn't even think I opened up the shutter and tried to give it the last gulp of exposure. And I would say you need all those tools. I mean, today with camera, the ASAs are getting crazy that you could just take an iPhone and bounce it off the wall and get enough light. What I think is you have to be really aware with all the technology that's around nowadays. So you always got to keep an eye out for what is out there that can help you. And I think that's critical.
What happens now?
Ted will be online soon. Victoria will report your rescue.
I mean, the lens is a very important consideration when doing candlelit scenes. You know, you need something that can go to at least a 1.4. A zoom lens with a 2.8 would have killed me on that shot. Things you do have to be careful with, you know, on lens choices when dealing with dark candles. Sometimes that funky lens you got that has a lot of, you know, aberrations on it, that were kind of great and easier in softer lighting, may be exasperated a lot more when you're dealing with candle, a very nice pinpoint of light. So you have to take that in consideration. I was working with master primes, so those are totally clean, but if you're dealing with Kowas or, some crazy lenses that just have, you pick the lens up and it kind of rattles in your head, you would say, you might just want to do a little test on that. You might watch what that lens does with candlelight, because it could blow out your whole image. It could be flares that may not be pleasant, and then you are chasing your tail by adding fill and adding other things to make that lamp less strong, but keeping your scene bright. So in Benjamin Buttons, there's a scene where Benjamin is with Daisy underneath the table with all these cloths. That camera had a very limited dynamic range and a very slow ISO. Those lenses were digiprimes and they weren't as open. I was getting really kind of lost on how to do the scene, and I remember just kind of sticking a practical in the middle.
I'm not as old as I look.
I thought so. You don't seem like an old person.
I tried to make the candle do as much work as possible and let it kind of blow out and not protecting it. Like kind of sometimes your nervous thing is try to protect the highlights and just let things go from time to time. So I like that style of shooting.
May I?
Okay.
I mean, here's some things you can do. You can actually get a triple wicks or fat wicks if you need to get more out of the candle. That's something that's pretty available. If you do have to add a little bit more light, you could add it from behind the candle with a little peanut globe. I mean, maybe you have a guy on the dimmer that's trying to mimic, the exact kind of way it's flickering to give it more realistic, because the candle, if there's a little bit of wind or there's a little bit of motion, it will naturally give you a little bit of flutter, which I think is beautiful. And you could try to emulate that. But now it's much easier. Now we have, cameras with ASAs that are, the dual ISOs on cameras that can go 4,000 ISO. So keep in concert that this is your source and you're being honest with that.